Now, this new feature was going to be my favourite cricketer, but then we decided that that's too hard. It's unfair. Who are we to ask Darren Gough who his single favourite cricketer is? So we've extended it to 5 cricketers who influenced you, inspired you, helped you become the great cricketer that you were, Darren Gough. And so we've limited it to 5. I'm sure you could probably have listed 55, but 5 cricketers who shaped who you became. So let's start off at the beginning. What's your earliest memory of being super inspired?
Super inspired. I always believe when you're growing up, you get to an age of around 10, 11, 12, and that's when it starts to take hold of you, what's happening in the world of sport. Football was always my main sport, so Glenn Hoddle was 81 was my sporting hero, along with Sevi Ballesteros playing golf and Nick Faldo. But in cricket, there's only one man. 81 Ashes. I was born in 70. I was 11. And I saw this guy running in, bowling, swing, aggressive, enjoying himself, smashing it all over and stuff like that. And I think my first bat then after that was a Duncan Fernley attack, and that's Sir Ian Botham. Absolute legend, loved the way he played, and I wanted to, if I was going to be a cricketer, I'd have wanted to be Ian Botham.
Lord.
Yeah,
Lord
Sir Ian Botham. Or Beefy to his mates.
Okay, we're going to circle back and talk more about him, but I want to make sure that everybody gets a fair and equal mention on your list of 5. So we'll come back to Lord Ian Botham. So he was one of the reasons you took up the game. Who's next on the list?
Well, it would have been the guy who discovered me, really. I went to just a normal school, right? State school, which wasn't really cricket oriented. It was all about football. We played a bit of cricket. Yorkshire schools, I was always on the kind of, I was just not quite in the first teams at Yorkshire schools, even though I used to open the bowling and batting for my town, which was Barnsley, which is still a huge area. I could not get in to the Yorkshire school system, into the main team. I think it's because there was a little bit of snobbery in it. The school I went to was rough, right? Where I come from, it was a roughish area. And it was very public school dominated back then. And if you didn't go to a certain person's nets, you were never going to get selected in it, right? Everybody had to go to this one person's nets. But the one guy who saw me and saw beyond that was a guy called Steve Oldham. He played for Yorkshire, played for Derbyshire. He was never a great, but he was a good performer. And he took me under his wing. First time he saw me, he went, "Why is this kid not playing in the Yorkshire school system? Why isn't he opening the bowling?" Next year, opened the bowling for the under-19s. And that was it. That happened so quick. And he took me under the wing. And we'll go into it more because he played a big part in my career. And he still does. I still speak to him all the time.
SO, as he was known, 129 first-class games, 273 wickets at 32, but was perhaps best known and is best known and best remembered for being a coach.
Absolutely. Just go through the mid-90s, and when he was in charge of the bowling there, Gough, Silverwood, White, Sidebottom, Hutchinson, Hamilton, Kirby, Dolby, Hoggard, Bresnan, Blaine. He brought all those on. Craig
White fascinates me because I remember him being an off-break bowler and suddenly he was bowling at 90 miles an hour.
SO turned him into a seamer.
That's an astonishing story. We'll come back, as I said, to him. Now then, third on the list is one of the coolest men I think I've ever seen in the game.
Which one?
Richie Richardson.
Oh, I'm going to say there's two of them. Waqar's quite cool. But Richie Richardson, for me, was 93. I was starting to develop as a bowler. I still were a little bit raw. And there were days when I'd bowl pretty quick and then other days when I'd be kind of medium, right? And I think it was a game against Hampshire. And when the captain of West Indies is so cool and he takes time out to push you because he sees the potential. I was playing against Hampshire. I got 4-4. Sean Udall came into bat, who's a mate of mine. And he goes, and I bowled him a juicy half volley. He hits me for 4. And he comes running from slip. And he comes up, he says, "You've got 4 wickets, young man." Not in them words, I'm saying it in a Yorkshire accent. But he said, "You got 4 wickets. He might be your friend." He said, "But I'm going to tell you what to do here." He said, "Malcolm Marshall's watching," because he were playing for them. He said, "Run in and knock his head off." and I ran in next ball, bowled him a bumper, bowled him another bumper, and then got him out and finished with 5-4. And he said to me that game, sat me down alongside Malcolm Marshall, and I chatted for an hour and a half with him about cricket, because he was one of my heroes as well, Malcolm Marshall, from that 80s era. But he just inspired me. Richie, captain of West Indies, and then I ended up playing against him and getting him out a couple of years later, which was a huge moment for me. I was so happy. I probably went OTT with it, because it was shocking delivery. I think it was a full toss in a one-day game when I got him out. But absolute legend, helped me so much. More of an inspiration, the West Indies captain, because everybody said the way I played was more like a West Indian than an English player. You know what I mean? The flair, the way I bowled, the way I batted, just the way I went about things. Yeah.
Well, you've touched on the other man on your list. I wouldn't have thought that. I wouldn't have put Waqar Younis in my cool list. He wouldn't have made my cool 11.
Oh, cool with a ball in hand, mate. Pretty cool with a ball in hand, and they come as a pair for me, Waqar and Wasim, but I go for Waqar because he's right-handed. It kind of made me watching him against England when England were 50-60 for none every test match, and then they were 120 all out, and watching that series, was it 92? So 92, I was still then very raw, and I was still not holding down a first team place with Yorkshire, and within a year I was opening the bowling, knocking everybody over, going on an England day tour. And those two inspired me on that tour. And I thought, I'm going to bowl like that. And I changed my action slightly. I dropped my arm, opened up quick, got closer to the stumps, opened my arm up when I wanted to bowl reverse swing. And then I become known, really, as the first English bowler to bowl, really, reverse swing. I don't think there's anybody before me who did it to the extreme. I did it with the Yorkers. And most of my wickets were LBW and bowl, which was similar to Waqar.
He brought reverse swing to a different plane of consciousness, and people weren't aware of it. And I mean, I remember the earliest days of his county career, and batsmen had no idea. They just, I mean, he retired Jeff Humpage, who was, I remember, he was
retired
on the verge of retiring, but he bowled him this massive in-swinging Yorker which hit him on the foot, and he literally limped into the pavilion, threw his bat into the corner and said, "That's me, done." He retired him. I mean, and
he bowled so many people. You go back and look at Waqar Younis when he was playing county cricket, and you look at the dismissals. How many people left the ball and got bowled leg stump? You'll be amazed. He played against Yorkshire, and I saw Phil Carrick, who, bless him, he's not with us anymore, but he left it, pure leave. He was so confident with the leave, and his leg stump went flying out the ground, right? And Waqar, the reverse swing late was just wow. And I practiced, I promise you, I practiced so much with that ball. I had an old ball, and I had it with me for 6 years. It went on tours with me with England, and I used it until it literally just fell apart in New Zealand. I was in New Zealand again when it just fell apart. It split and everything. That was it. But I had it 6 years, that ball, and I bowled with it. So it must have been nearly 1,000 overs old, this ball, and I was still bowling with it and practicing reverse swing.
I know that there's a dark art to reverse swing, sometimes, occasionally, but there is also legitimate ball maintenance, and you have to learn that. You can't just, it's not just about your arm action and your wrist position and all of those things. There is, ball maintenance is critical, and
absolutely,
you must have been at the forefront of that as well in your career.
Experimenting. A lot of people always used to say, don't get it wet, keep it so dry, you know what I mean? One side's going to natural scuff up with the surface, the other one just keep it dry and shine it and all that sort of stuff. You see, I experimented. I went to when we went to Pakistan in 2001, the last of my tours really before my injury, when I knew it was going to be difficult in Sri Lanka and Pakistan, I actually soaked the ball. I soaked it.
The whole thing, not one side?
Yeah, one side. Soaked it rather than do the opposite. So I experimented all the time. If it didn't work doing one way, I did something else. And yeah, ball maintenance is a big part of it. But the biggest part for me that not enough people practice, and I remember this from my coaching stuff and doing stuff with England under 19s a few years ago, I said to them, I gave them all a ball. I used to give everyone a new ball. Right, that's your new ball. There's your old ball. There's your two practice balls. Put your name on it. These are yours. You don't lose them. They're your two balls. That old ball stays with you for the next year or so, 2 years. You practice with it. And I said, have you ever seen reverse swing? And all of them, England 19's this? No, never seen one. Never practiced it. Never done anything. No. I was like gobsmacked because they played against India, who were bowling slow balls out of the backhand, reverse swing. They were so far behind India in this series, and then they were practicing bowling the reverse, and none of them could control it. So I got these balls that were really reverse. We did the exaggeration on them, scratched them on the floor and everything, so they could practice. And the hardest thing is getting your action right, because it changes your whole alignment and where you want to set it off. So all of them kept bowling it down the leg side, you know, and that's why you have to practice it. You can't just run up, oh, it's reversing, I'm just going to run up and put it on a length and line. It's different. It goes later, it goes faster, and you have to practice it. It's a huge art.
The quarter seam obviously plays a role as well, but I mean, wetting one side of the ball, we see sometimes you use sweat. You used to use saliva when you were allowed to. But making one side of the ball heavier than the other makes sense, doesn't it? Was it the same process every time, or sometimes was it keeping one side super dry, other times wetting? Did the process of making the ball reverse change?
Well, I'll tell you when I used to do it. When it was really, really dry, the ground, I used to soak it. So everybody else might have been on a different planet to me, but in my head, when it was really, really dry, like I said, when I toured Sri Lanka, toured Pakistan, I really soaked it. And I tried to tell the players, but you know what it's like. Some listen, some don't.
Everybody needs to understand what's happening there.
Yeah, and that was a big frustration back then because not many people did understand it. I think now there's a lot more communication, a lot more people know how to use it, and they're all on the same page, right? Meeting after meeting. But you can imagine in the mid-90s, there wasn't really about meetings. Some of the coaches we had were just not, just give it a Goughy, he'll bowl with a reverse swing. You know what I mean, or Corky or Craig White. So luckily we had three guys who could do it in that mid-90s, late 90s.
Okay, we're kind of circling back towards Lord Ian Botham, or just Beefy as he was in his earliest days. But he the secret about getting the best out of him was having the right captain, and Mike Brearley was obviously the man who brought out the best in Sir Ian Botham. And you were a similar maverick genius, and people said, like, you need to bring out the best in Goughy. And I know that Alex Stewart was your first captain, but Nasser Hussain captained you most. And was he the Mike Brearley to you? Did he bring the best out in you? He's on your list.
Yeah, I mean, I think what happened but I played under some captains that really didn't really suit me and my personality. Yorkshire was David Byas, England was Michael Atherton. Michael Atherton was a top player, but he was very focused on his game as well, and he didn't really understand a lot about fast bowling. Alex Stewart then came for me, who was totally different. He was supportive, he chatted to me about bowling, he was good, but that wasn't for a long period, was it? It was a real short period. And then Nasser. And Nasser just backed me to the hilt. Similar to what Ben Stokes does with his team. When you trust someone, and you believe in someone, and you know he's a big part. If England are going to do well, he needed me to bowl well. Me and Caddick as a partnership, right? We're both totally different characters. He knows where I'm like. I can be stubborn, but he knows he winds me up to the point where I'm like wanting, like, you know, and that's where I had to get myself into, where nothing's going to stop my concentration. Because I could drift. I was sometimes away with the fairies. And he just kept me on point. He would keep me on point. Because he would come to me some days and call me every name under the sun. And he knew that would get me wound up. And I used to go back at him and back at him and back at him. So it was like a love-hate relationship. But it worked so well.
Did you know you were being wound up? Did you know that that's what he was doing?
Yeah, but I knew I was being wound up, but I used to bite all the time. I couldn't stop myself biting at him. And I wouldn't, and he respected me as well, because I would go back at him. I wouldn't just say, all right, and then go away and moan at him. I'd moan to his face and tell him what I thought of him to his face. And I think there's still a huge respect between me and Nasser. Whenever we see each other, there's a huge respect. We still hardly talk. I mean, you know what he's like. He's not the easiest to talk to, Nas. But I think between us, there's a huge respect. Huge respect.
It's back to it's Ian Botham then. He was the inspiration, not just to you, but to, I would say, literally hundreds of thousands of people. What was your relationship like then, as you became? You started your Yorkshire career and went through your career and your England career. How did your relationship shape with him?
Yeah, I think it's a decent relationship, but I've always still been a little bit shy when it comes down to Beefy, you know, because he was my hero growing up. And it's not one of them where a lot of people say you should never want to meet your heroes because sometimes you meet them and, you know what I mean, you're disappointed. I wasn't disappointed when I met Beefy. I thought he was exactly what I was. I'd seen him in Panto and seen him perform. And he played football as well, which was another interest I had. Saw him on Question of Sport. All this sort of stuff were like, he was just a huge celebrity, wasn't he? And he still is, right? Everybody still knows who Beefy is. And the amazing thing is, he was born on 24th of November. My son, oldest son, was born 24th of November. And he's called Liam James. Guess what Beefy's son's called?
Liam
James.
Oh.
I couldn't believe it. I didn't know that at all. It was just pure coincidence. Born on the same day as Beefy, and my son's the same name as his son. Mad, innit?
Absolutely.
He's really mad. But he's an absolute ledge. And every time I see him, I say hello. But I still feel kind of, when I see him, it's like,
in awe.
I don't know what to say to him. I've had a drink with him and everything, and more comfortable having a drink with him than anything else. But I listen, he's the gold standard for anybody who's my age, and I'm 53. Growing up, I don't think there's anybody who doesn't adore Beefy as a cricketer. There's plenty of others that era. Malcolm Marshall was I'm a huge fan of him. Richard Hadley, Kapil Dev, Imran Khan, all those all-rounders, they're kind of in your head, you know. That's what you want to be. You want to bat, you want to bowl, you want to field.
When your career was, when you were at your peak, in your pomp, did you remember the influence that Ian Botham and those early characters had on you? And were you conscious of the influence that you were having on youngsters who were also looking up to you in the same way that you did with him?
Do you know, when I was playing, I didn't really think... If I knew Beefy was commentating, I probably might have stepped up a yard. I wanted to impress him. But the only person that used to enter my mind when I played at my peak was Steve Oldham, because back then we were allowed phones, and all he had to do, because he'd known me from 15, he'd text me. So I'd come off at lunchtime, look at my phone, and it'd be front arm, get it a bit higher, you know what I mean? You're falling away a little bit too early, come a bit straighter in, you run up. He'd just say code messages to me, which I understood, and I knew because he had been my coach from being 15. And it's not that, if you speak to him about me, he'll tell you, he very rarely had to do anything with me. I was a natural kind of bowler. All he had to do, just keep me in check with those natural attributes and make sure sometimes when I got tired, that's when I opened up a little bit too early, and then, you know what I mean, lower arm came, probably because I was bowling Yorkers as well, trying to go for that magic ball. And then when I took the new ball in the second innings or something, if I've been bowling a lot of Yorkers, I won't get in the swing I normally get because my arm was a little bit low and my front arm was pulling away too early because of the practice I've been doing of Yorkers. So he was just there as my eyes because he knows me better than anyone else. So he was my eyes.
You became the celebrity like Sir Ian Botham. I mean, you know, with Strictly and all of the things you did off the field when
I'll be doing the foot soak next one. I was putting my feet, you know what I mean?
But back to the point about you becoming an icon and a role model for youngsters. You kind of sidestepped that. I mean, you very personable. You like to be around people. And that wasn't always the case with Beefy, was it? I mean, he knew that he was.
Still is. He's still very guarded.
Guarded. That's a good word.
He's still very guarded.
That's not your style, though.
No.
Are you aware of the influence and effect that you will have on youngsters?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, no matter what era you're from, you remember growing up. And so for me, that era just before me were Beefy, and that's who influenced me. And then there's players behind me who played probably 5 or 6 years I might have played with, who would say, that I influenced them in some small way, right? And then I know when I'd gone there and I was still playing at the end, people like your Harmisons, your Flintoffs were coming through, your Petersons, your Vaughans, and they influence people. And it changes all the time. And now you look and you're looking at this. Stokes influences people. Root influences people. Anderson and Broad. So it's changing all the time. And again, there's more 11-year-old kids waking up today and watching the cricket, and they'll be hoping to see a Robinson or an Anderson taking 5 wickets, and then they'll look at the TV and go, I want to be like that, or I want my hair like Ollie Robinson, or I want to bat like Joe Root. And that's what's great about it, because you can see it happening. And my kids are the same. My kids, when they were growing up, it's amazing, they both stood like Kevin Peterson, and I ended up being his best man, right? You know that. But my older son used to stand like Kevin Peterson when he batted. And it changed with the wind. Whoever he was watching on TV, it changed all the time. So it was KP for a while, then it was probably Joe Root, then it was so, and he's changing all the time. Rather than be himself, he's influenced by watching TV. And look how many Malingers there is now. Wherever you go in the world, man, as a new commentator all around the world, how many bowlers bowl like Malinga?
I know.
I've never seen as many.
I know. I thought it would be a one-off. First time I saw Lasse Erlinger, I thought
Everywhere.
nobody will ever bowl like
Everywhere.
that again. Yeah. Was there a spell, back to Waqar Younis, because I was mesmerised in the early stages of his career. When I saw reverse swing, I'd never seen it before. It was like a different game. Was there a delivery, particular delivery, or a spell from Waqar that you remember thinking, I can't believe what I'm seeing here? And do you think you ever emulated it? So was there a spell that you bowled when the ball was really hooping from a foot outside off stump and tailing in towards leg stump?
Oh, yeah, I've got definitely moments in my career when I look back and I think, wasn't quite as quick as Waqar. I think Waqar had a quicker, another gear to me. But I definitely, he would have watched me at certain parts. I played against him in that 2001 Pakistan series, and I was probably quicker than him then, by the way. And I probably bowled better Yorkers than him then in that series. So he would have looked, and he knows I liked him. I played against Wasim Akram, and many times I used to admire Wasim playing against Yorkshire for Lancashire and thinking, how is he doing that? Swinging the ball round the wicket. Remember the World Cup 92? I mean, those deliveries from round the wicket, swinging away from the right-hander. Ridiculous. And then in. But Waqar, for me, was that series against England. It might have been Edgbaston, where England were, there might have been 100 for one. I think Stewie was 70 of them. And then he come on and he just went zzz, 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 and it was just like 140 all out. I've never seen anything like it. And I'm thinking, flat pitch, England are cruising, suddenly the ball is misbehaving. It's swinging massively in from 2 foot outside off stump. There's got to be something in that. And I practiced, and I promise you, that was a game changer for me. If I would have never seen Waqar and Wasim doing that, 92 World Cup, and then playing against England in that series, I can't remember what year it was. It might have been 92, could have been 93. But I remember it and thinking, I'm going to do that.
A final word then to Nasser. One of my favourite comments was when he and Duncan Fletcher got together. I can't remember which one is actually credited with saying it, but they said, we might not be the best team in the world, we might not be good enough to become the best team in the world, but we can at least be the best team that we can be. And
That'd have been Fletch.
Was that?
He'll have read it out of someone's book. He's a big reader, Fletch.
I just think that those two turned around an ordinary England team, and you were at the forefront of
Absolutely. I think what they worked out, Duncan, when he first came in, I'll never forget it. He came in, and we all looked at each other, who's this? He doesn't say anything. Literally, for 2 months, he did not say a word. And everyone was talking about, like you do, he said, this is useless, this bloke. He don't do. But what he was doing, he's just watching. He was watching for the people that he wants to be around, and he believed that could fight for the shirt and get the best out of it. And I tell you what, he found them. And that period, when they say English cricket was rubbish, he wasn't. That was a good side. To go to Sri Lanka and win, beat a top Sri Lankan side, by the way, go to Sri Lanka and Pakistan and win. But the only team we didn't beat was Australia. And I think that will always be something that bugs me. Alex Stewart, Graham Hick, Michael Atherton. None of us won an Ashes series, right? And it bugs us because we had such a good team. We had a good team. We never played our best team. The selection committee back then was mad. It changed from every single day. But we could have, but we just couldn't get over the line.
Darren Gough's 5 favourite cricketers, Sir Ian Botham, Waqar, Younis, Richie Richardson, Steve Oldham and Nasser Hussain.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.